With the holidays coming up, a question I get quite often is, if I've never owned an Xbox before, which one should I go with? Let's make sure to get that question answered for you today and ensure you're not wasting your money. Coming up. Hey, I'm Sam with Busy Dad Gaming. I help busy dads figure out which games to play on Xbox so they can relax and go back to their families recharged. I've owned an Xbox clear back to the original, and I still remember that Duke controller. That thing was a beast, but man, that thing was huge. Back then, I was actually more inclined to play on the DualShock because it was smaller. You know, 5'6" personal problems. But back in my day, there was only one Xbox and that was it. And then you went into the 360 era, and the 360, again, there was just the one, and then you had revisions over time. Once we got to the Xbox One era, that's when things really started to change, and we started to not only see just the Xbox version itself, but you also had revisions, you had updates, you had upgrades, and it got a little bit confusing to where now you were looking at, you had the Xbox One, you had the Xbox One S, you had the One X, now you have the Series S and the Series X. To be fair, only two of them are actually in production today. You can't get the One X brand new, direct off the assembly line. They're not making them anymore. So today, let's figure out which Xbox console is gonna make the most sense for you. And to start it off, do not buy the OG Xbox One or the One S. Literally, going forward, never buy those consoles unless you're like a collector or something like that you just want some of those old school consoles. So now that we have that out of the way, that leaves it just three consoles. You have the Xbox One X, the Xbox Series S, and the Xbox Series X. The One X, as I mentioned before, no longer in production, so if you do find it brand new, good for you, I guess. The full price for that thing is kind of up there. Or you can buy that thing used. And then you have obviously the Series S and the Series X, which you can potentially buy brand new in today's market conditions. So to jump into the One X, you're looking at used. I've seen this thing between $300 and $400 US with lower prices potentially if you end up going through like a private seller or something like that. Full retail for that box was $500 USD. So that is right on par with a Series X. So if you do find that thing brand new, you potentially could be paying the exact same price as a Series X, which I obviously don't encourage you to do. Now the One X is aiming for 4K 30 in most instances. Technically could go up to 4K 60 in some games depending on the type of game, but that was relatively rare. You could also see Xbox One X enhanced games. There were quite a few of them by the time the console ended its life cycle, so that's also something to take into account. Now the Xbox One X is more graphically powerful from a resolution standpoint than the Series S, and obviously it is lower than the Series X. There were some heating issues on some of those earlier models with the One X, so that's something to keep in mind. The later versions I don't think had this particular issue, but the HDMI ports could end up getting heated and then you could end up just getting a black screen, in which case makes it a little difficult to play a video game. So there were some hardware issues, they were few and far between, but those were some of the only hardware issues I was aware of, so not a red ring of death kind of thing. Now obviously the One X does have a optical drive that can play Blu-ray. It also has a hard disk drive, so you were looking at a mechanical disk drive, so loading times were still a thing. It's again no longer in production, so you could potentially find it brand new, but more often than not it would end up being used. Which then brings us to the Series S, which you're looking at runs typically around $300 USD. You can end up getting different deals and bundles, so just keep an eye out for those. Now the Series S is targeting 1440p at 120 in most instances, although there's not many games that actually hit that right now, but I'm sure as the generation continues on and things get a little more optimized, you'll start to see that a little bit more often. There are no discernible hardware issues that I'm currently aware of with the Series S, so again, no red ring of death issue here. It also supports all of the latest greatest games and has the backwards compatibility. It will not run Xbox One X enhanced games, so on those particular games it will run the One S version. Now the Series S is an all digital platform, so obviously disk drives aren't going to be a thing on this. So it does have 380-ish gigabytes of usable storage. So depending on what kind of games you play, that could be a lot of games or it could be COD. Now the other thing to keep in mind with the Series S is it is not graphically as powerful as the One X or the Series X from a resolution standpoint. It can do higher frame rates technically than the One X can, depending on the game and what is actually supported. So those are some of those caveats that you're going to be looking at when it comes between these three systems. Is what is the developer actually supporting, and what can that console generate as a result of that? Now, the last thing with the Series S, based upon current market conditions here when we're recording this video, it is more available than the Series X, but that doesn't mean it's so readily available that you can just walk down and go and grab one. It does take potentially a little more planning, but I know a lot of people that have gone and walked into a Target or a Walmart and just picked one off the shelf. And last but not least, we have the Xbox Series X, which at retail should run you $500 USD. Please don't buy it from a scalper. Just don't reinforce those. Now the Series X is aiming for 4K 120, but in most instances it's hitting 4K 60 and then dropping the resolution to hit those higher frame rates. For example, Halo is getting around 1440p at 111 frames per second. As the generation continues to move forward, I'm sure we'll start to see better optimizations, and that frame rate and that resolution will continue to increase and start to hit those benchmarks that they're potentially aiming for. Now, as of this video, there are no hardware issues with the Series X, at least that I'm currently aware of, and it does support all the latest and greatest games. Now, for, again, the backwards compatible games, if it is running a 1X enhanced game, it will run that enhanced game. It does not go down to the 1S version. So again, that's something to keep in mind when it comes to those backwards compatible titles. It is the most powerful console on the market according to Xbox marketing, and it does include an optical drive. Now, one thing is it does have 1 terabyte of space. So usable, you're looking at 802 gigs of storage, which for a lot of cases is more than efficient in this early in the generation, but there are ways to expand storage just like it is with the Series S. Now, the last thing with the Series X, it is incredibly difficult to find right now. You'll end up having to track stock alerts, look at people that are saying, when things are coming in, and there's a lot of time and effort that needs to be put in to capture one of those Series X's. Now, that is a brief overview of those three consoles. If you want to go more in depth, I'll link some things at the end of the video that you can dive into that'll take you deeper into each of those systems. But for now, which one should you actually get? And the real answer is, it depends. Now, what it really depends on is your use case. Now, as I've been talking with a lot of people in the community, you have a lot of people that are going after the Series S and think it's, the best thing for them. You have another group that, the Series X is the best thing for them. And then you have people that may still have a 1X and they don't have any reason to upgrade and they're perfectly happy with that. It really comes down to the use case for you. Now, for those of you that have never owned an Xbox, there's usually two different specific use cases that I will address in this particular video. The first is someone that has not owned a console recently, meaning they may have had a 360 as an example, or a PS3, and they didn't do anything last generation, so they don't have any current consoles in the house. And two is someone that may have a PS5 or a PS4 or a Switch, and they want something to go ahead and dive into the Xbox ecosystem. Those are the two most common use cases I've found when it comes to someone that has never or does not own an Xbox console but wants to own an Xbox console. So the real answer is, let's break these two things down. So for an Xbox Series S, for the price point, coupled with Game Pass, it's really hard to get a better value in gaming today. Now, granted, the storage is not ideal. I'll just say that right off the bat. There is not a lot of storage with this. So you may end up needing either a USB external drive or going with one of those Seagate expansion drives. Do not go with the 2 terabyte version. That is ridiculous that you'd pay more for storage than the actual box itself. The other great thing is with the Series S, especially if you are either never owning a console over the last generation as example, or have never owned one, or you have a PS4 or a PS4 Pro, then you're looking at the Series S can utilize any kind of hardware that you have from a TV perspective, and it'll just work. You don't have to really do too much around that. The other thing that you're going to want to look at is Game Pass for first party titles is day and date. So you're not having to pay additional money for the game. So you get the box, get Game Pass, and then things like Halo Infinite, Forza Horizon 5, and then you start getting other games a little further down the road when you may end up looking at like Forza Horizon or Forza Motorsports as an example. You get all those games as part of the subscription, and if you end up upgrading to Ultimate, then you get access to EA Play games, you get access to the Game Pass for PC, and you get cloud streaming. So it ends up expanding that overall ecosystem even further. The other big thing with the Series S, especially if you own a PS5 already, is that it's a lot easier to get right now than an Xbox Series X. And it's also a lower barrier of entry to get into the Xbox ecosystem as opposed to going with a Series X and then either having to upgrade your way into utilizing those capabilities, or you don't use them at all and then you kind of waste half of the Series X capability. So there's that too. The other big thing here is that it really allows you to test the Xbox ecosystem and see if it's a good fit for you and something that you actually want to leverage. The biggest thing I continue to say is that play the games that you want to play where you want to play them. Now, if all you play is third-party games, it may just be the controller that ends up being your deciding factor. Or if it's exclusive games that you really want and you can only afford one system, then pick which exclusive games you want the most. It's things like this that you're going to be taking into account. And for the Series S, as I mentioned, it is one of the best values in gaming, and that barrier of entry to get into the Xbox ecosystem is much, much lower. But Sam, there are going to be those people that have never owned an Xbox that want a Series X. They want that latest and greatest. And that's a good point. So for a lot of those people, they may already own a PS5 and they want a Series X because they want the best of both worlds. Or they have never owned a console or the last generation, but they want the best that Xbox has to offer. Those are very valid use cases as well. So in those cases, buy the Series X. Buy what is going to make you happy within reason. If you're not already fully into the Xbox ecosystem and you know you want to be, jump in, go do it, enjoy yourself. But if you're hesitant about it, then you may want to start with a Series S and work your way into it, because the Series S you can always trade in towards a Series X if that's the way you want to go. Or if you find that the PlayStation is more your style, then you can trade it in towards whatever you're going on that side of the fence for. If you don't like it, you can trade it in, but at least you get into the opportunity to jump into the Xbox ecosystem and see if it's going to be a good fit for you. So generally speaking, the Series S is the best beginner way or entry-level way to get into Xbox. And if you already know that you want the latest and greatest, dive into the Series X and enjoy it. Now, coming at this from a dad's perspective, time is my biggest challenge right now. My 9-month-old is going through a sleep regression. I'm not getting a ton of sleep right now. And so a lot of my time is either work or family. I don't have a ton of extra time to game right now. So the time that I do get, I want to just enjoy gaming and not have to worry about whether it's going to work or not. So depending again on your use case, the Series S is going to be the easiest way as a entry-level system to see if you like Xbox or not. And it's not going to break your bank to do it. You get the Series S, couple it with Game Pass, and again, one of the best values in gaming you're going to get today. Now, the Series X is a fantastic piece of hardware. I absolutely love my Series X, and it is my main console right now. And I suggest getting a Series X if you want the latest and greatest, and either A, you're looking to upgrade to the tech necessary to utilize the Series X in full, or you already have that tech. Either way, Series S, Series X, you're going to enjoy it, but it depends on your use case. Now, if you have kids that game too, my 9-month-old is only old enough to really slobber all over the controller, so she can't really do much with it. But if you have kids that are playing games, the Series S is easily one of the better options to go with in this instance, unless you're all playing on the same box, in which case, potentially the Series X may make a little more sense in that case, depending again on your use case. It all comes down to how you're going to use it and what your overall plans are going forward. Now, if you want to make sure that you're avoiding some of those concerns with either the Series S or the Series X, or see if there's anything that you're missing, make sure to check out those respective videos, and I'll see you out there.